Good morning and welcome to Daf Yomi. To all those watching on Zoom, to all those watching on YouTube, it is wonderful to have you with us today. We are going to be doing page 142, Daf Kuf Mem Beis on Masechet Shabbos. We are so close to reaching the completion of Masechet Shabbos. It is quite exciting. I say that we're going to start with 142, but as is often the case, we're actually going to backtrack a little bit to the bottom of 141 to just see the Mishnah so that we understand where we are coming from today. So we're going to get this up on the screen for you over here. And we're going to get this up for the screen on you. We're going to get this up on the screen for you over here. So everybody should be able to see that. Is that correct?
Yes, fine.
Excellent. Okay, so we are into the 21st chapter, everybody. 21st chapter of Masechet Shabbat. And some interesting stuff going on over here. So without further ado, let's have a look at the Mishnah that we would have seen at the end of yesterday's daf, and that will help us to appreciate where we are at the beginning of today's stuff. So the Mishnah said like this: Notav Adam es beno v'ha'even biyado. You are allowed to pick up a kid. You're allowed to carry your kid, move your kid on Shabbos, even if he has a stone in his hand. We've said previously that a stone is muktzah, and so you might think that you can't pick the kid up because he is currently holding a muktzah item. So the Mishnah is telling us that you can carry a stone inside, even though it's carry a kid, even though he's holding a stone. And the Mishnah says, and you can lift up a basket, even if there's a stone inside the basket. Not only that, but the Mishnah says, in the Metaltalin, Teruma Tamea, Im Hatahora, V'im Achulin. And you would even be allowed to move a basket that contains Teruma food, which is ritually impure, and is not going to be much use to you on Shabbos, if it is in a basket with pure Teruma items, or if it was in a basket with chulin items, with items that are not sacred for any other use. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Af Malin Esamaduma Be'echad Umeya. Rabbi Yehuda says you could even lift up a basket if it contained a mixture known as muduma. What is muduma? So muduma is a situation where you have a mixture of chulin and teruma. You have a mixture of items which are just normal fruits, for example, but they have been mixed with teruma items which have been designated only to be eaten and consumed and benefited from by a kohen. So the problem now in a mixture of meduma is that it's all mixed together. You don't know what is what. So the following rules apply in a situation of meduma. If there is a ratio of less than 100 to 1, so let's say you have got one teruma apple which falls into a mixture of 90 or 98 or 99, 98 or 99, one of the two, chulin apples. So if it mixes in, so the whole mixture is going to be forbidden, right? Because you don't know which apple is teruma and which apple is chulin. If the ratio is 100 to 1, so one teruma apple falls into a mixture of 100 chulin apples, then the teruma apple gets subsumed and it gets nullified in this mixture, and then you will be allowed to consume those apples as long as you take what would have been the amount of teruma out. As long as you rectify that somewhat, then you'd be allowed to benefit from the mixture. So we don't need to go into all of the ins and outs, but that's just what meduma is. It's when you have a mixture of teruma fruits or teruma items mixed with chulin items, and then at which point there's a ratio of 100 to 1 before you'd be able to have any benefit from it. So here we're saying, Rabbi Yehuda says, you'd even be allowed to move this mixture if it was 101, as in there was 100 apples or 100 pieces of whatever to the one teruma item that came in. you'd be allowed to move that. So that was yesterday's Mishnah, and we're going to pick it up about 8 or so lines down with the 2 dots and the words kalkala v'ha'even over here. So we're going to pick up a point from the Mishnah that was making that you're allowed to pick up a basket with a stone inside. That's where we're picking it up from. And the Gemara is going to ask the following question. Va'amai, why should you be allowed to pick up a basket with a stone in? Tehave kalkala basis l'davar ha'asur. Why do we not say that this basket has become a basis l'davar ha'asur? What's a basis l'davar ha'asur? It is a base for a forbidden item, right? When you have an item of muktzah put down before Shabbat on top of something, so whatever it is resting on top of becomes a basis l'davar ha'asur, and you should be prohibited from being able to move the item on which the stone rests. So that's what the Gemara is asking over here, straight off the bat. You've got a basket with a stone in it. You shouldn't be allowed to move the basket because it has become a basis, a foundation, a support for a forbidden item. So you shouldn't be allowed to move it. Says the Gemara, Amar Rabba Bar Chana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabba Bar Chana says in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Hacha b'kalkala melea peros askinan. We are dealing with a situation where the basket is full of fruit and it is also filled with a stone. So it is a base. Oh, good morning, Stephen. It is a base, and Juliet. It is a base for a forbidden item, but it's a base for permitted items as well, and therefore you'd be allowed to move it. Says the Gemara. But hang on a minute, we have another solution. Let's take out the fruit, and then we can take out the stone. Yeah, let him throw the fruit and the stone out of the basket, and then you can just and you can just pick up the fruit with your hands. So why do we not make that the solution or the suggestion? Says the Gemara, Rabbi Eloi Amarav, Beperis Hamitanfin. What we're dealing with over here, says Rabbi Eloi in the name of Rav, we are talking about fruit which is going to get dirty if you drop it on the floor. It's going to get soiled. You won't want to eat it. Hachinami Beperis Hamitanfin. So for over here, he was referring to another case, but over here as well we could argue that we're talking about fruits that would become soiled and ruined, and therefore it's not a solution to tip it all out of the basket because you're going to ruin what you want to eat. Says the Gemara. Let's shake the basket until the stone is off to one side, and then you'll be able to just lob the stone out of the basket without having to damage any of the fruits. Amar Rav Chia bar Ashi Amar Rava. Rav Chia bar Ashi in the name of Rava says, Hacha b'kalkala b'chusa askinan de'even gufa na'aseh sturfen ha'kalkala. We're dealing with a situation where the stone is serving a purpose, it's blocking a hole in the side of the basket. And so therefore, if you throw the stone out of the basket, it is going to cause the fruits to roll through the hole, and then they're going to get dirty, and we don't want that. So it's a very specific kind of scenario, perhaps we could say, where the Mishnah is telling us that you can move a basket with a stone. It has to have fruits inside, but more specifically, it has to have fruits inside that if they fell out, they would get dirty. And the stone has to be serving a purpose that you literally can't afford for the stone to come out of the basket. In such a situation, you'd be allowed to move it. Okie dokie. Metaltalin teruma, says the Mishnah. This was telling us that you're allowed to move teruma tameh, impure, ritually impure teruma that is inside with ritually pure teruma. You'd be allowed to move that. Amar Rav Chisda says, Lo shanu ela shetahara lamata u'tameh lamala. That's only going to be applicable, says Rav Chisda, if the pure teruma is on the bottom and the impure teruma is on the top. Because because if you have the pure on the top and the impure on the bottom, says the Gemara, shakil leila tahara v'shavik leila tmeya. So then you could just take out the pure items and leave the ritually impure items on the bottom. Says the Mishnah, says the Gemara, where is it in here? Okay, says the Gemara, well, if that's the case, when the pure teruma is on the bottom, let's throw out the impure teruma on the top, and then you can just take out the pure items. To which we have the same response again. We've seen elsewhere that Amarav Eloi Amarav. Rav Eloi said in the name of Rav, the Perosamitamphinas, we're talking about, again, fruits that are going to become soiled. So even if it's tame, you can't really just lob out fruit and get it all soiled and get it all ruined. You have to be careful with that as well. So that's the situation that we're talking about over there as well. Fruits that are going to be soiled if they come flying out. Mesve. We do, however, have a challenge to this. Metaltalin teruma tamea im hatahora ve'im achulin bein shetahora lamalo tamea lamata bein shetamea lamalo tahora lamata. We seem to have a challenge against Rav Chisda. Rav Chisda said a minute ago that that it's only if the pure items are on the bottom. But hold on, we have another source which says that you are allowed to move impure with the pure, whether the pure is at the bottom or whether the pure is at the top. Tiyuf to Rav Chisda. This would seem to be a proof against Rav Chisda. Amalach Rav Chisda. Rav Chisda would say to you, Masnisin letzorech gufo, b'raisa letzorech mechomer. Rav Chisda would say like this: the Mishnah permits moving impure teruma with pure teruma only when the pure teruma is on the top, because what you are needing to do is move the item, the gufa. The gufa of the item is the basket, so we need to move the basket. And so if you need to move the basket, you will only be allowed to move that if the pure teruma is on the top. But the baraisa that we're quoting, which says it doesn't matter which one is on top, that is when baraisa letzorech mekomer, that is when you want the place, that is when you want the space inside the basket to be able to use it for something else. In which case, in such a situation, I believe even Rav Chisda would agree that you can move out the teruma, tamea, tahara, pure, impure, it wouldn't matter. You'd be able to move the basket if you were trying to create space to put something else there. So when you need the basket, you can move it. When you need the space, the basket is sitting on the dining room table and you need the dining room table to be able to have lunch, right? So in such a situation where you're moving the item for the space on which it was residing, in such an instance, it wouldn't matter if the pure was on the top or on the bottom, you'd be able to move it. What is pushing Rav Chisda to interpret our Mishnah, to establish our Mishnah, as only in an instance of moving the item for the item's sake, in which case only impure teruma would be on the top in such an instance. What is compelling him to say that is the scenario in our Mishnah? Amarava masnisin kavase daika. Rava says that masnisin kavase daika, that we can interpret the Mishnah as being in accordance with his opinion, because the Katani Sefer. Because if we have a look at another part of the Mishnah, which comes literally in the next Mishnah, on the next page. So the Sefer, meaning the end part of this Mishnah, if we can imagine the whole Mishnah as being one long flow of text. So the end part of the Mishnah, which we actually see separately on the next page, the later clause says, Ma'os shalakar, menayas sakar ve'enavos. So if you have money which is on the pillow, so you can't move money on Shabbos because it's muktzah, but it's on top of the pillow. So we're going to learn that you can shake the pillow and the money will be able to fall off. Va'amar Rabba bar Barchana bar Rabbi Yochanan, and Rabba bar Barchana in the name of Rabbi Yochanan is going to say, Lo shanu ela l'sorech gufo, aval l'sorech mekom metaltala v'odan alav. So what we're going to see there, I believe, is that Rabbi Yochanan is going to have an opinion that you only need to shake it off if you need the pillow. But if you need the space that the coins are occupying, then he's going to say that you can move the pillow even with the coins on it. And since the latter clause that we're going to see is talking about needing the item itself, there's going to be a certain level of consistency between the clause that we're seeing in the next Mishnah about the pillow and the clause that we're seeing in this Mishnah about the Teruma, in both instances we're going to be interpreting to these to mean that we're needing the space. So the Mishnah is being consistent throughout, and that is what compelled Rav Chisda to support that opinion. Okie dokie. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Af Ma'alim. Rabbi Yehuda says that you can even lift up the basket if it contains medumah, if it contains this mixture that is at a ratio of 100 to 1. Says the Gemara, V'amai. Why is that the case? Why is it permitted? Hakam metakein. You are rendering the produce fit for consumption. Hakam metakein. You're fixing something up, which is going to be a problem on the Sabbath. Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Eliezer, severely. Rabbi Yehuda holds like Rabbi Eliezer. Za'ama teruma ba'ina machasa. Which says like this. Rabbi Eliezer says that let's see how it translates over here. I want to say that that it's never really considered mixed together. But why do I want to say that? How does it say it over here? Holds in accordance with the opinions of Rabbi Eliezer, who said teruma is considered as if it is placed in its pure unadulterated state, meaning that if you lift the measure of teruma, you are not rendering the rest of the mixture fit for consumption. It is considered as if the measure of teruma never intermingled with the rest of the produce, and the measure. Okay, yes, very good. So when you have a situation of 100 to 1, when there is the appropriate ratio in place, then the item is becoming nullified. Okay, so you're not actually forbidding the mixture and then rectifying the situation to make it permitted. The mixture is as if it's never been intermingled in the first place, says Rabbi Eliezer. If the ratio and the proportions are correct, then you've not actually created a problematic mixture, and so you're not actually fixing anything when you take out the problematic teruma item, or whichever item you take out. So it would seem then that Rabbi Yehuda is saying you're allowed to lift it up, and you're not going to be forbidding anything, because actually, by the items being together, you haven't created a problematic mixture which you are then fixing. So that is Rabbi Eliezer's opinion, and Rabbi Yehuda is holding like him. Titman, for we see in the Mishnah, Sa'at teruma shenaf le'lapachos mimea v'nidm'u. If you have a sa'ah, specific amount, or a specific quantity of teruma that fell into a mixture that was less than 100 sa'ah, meaning the ratio is not going to be enough, v'nafal mina meduma le'makom acher. But then you have a situation where that mixture, which is now forbidden because the teruma is mixed inside of it, that now falls into another place, into another barrel or basket of apples. So now the combined total is going to be more than 100 to 1. But the problem is that what fell into this second mixture, into this second barrel, was a forbidden mixture. And yet Rabbi Eliezer says, Midamas Ketrumas Vadai. Rabbi Eliezer is going to treat it as Rabbi Eliezer is going to treat this forbidden mixture as if it was all teruma tameh, as if it was all prohibited, and that it falls into this new thing. And so in this second mixture, there would have to be an enormous amount to reach the 100 to 1 threshold of this big amount that fell in already. That's what Rabbi Eliezer is going to hold. The rabbis say that it is going to be, it is going to take both ratios. One second. I think I'm mistaken there. I think Rabbi Eliezer is saying that if there was a sa'ah of forbidden teruma, sorry, I think this is what it means. If there was a sa'ah, we don't need to worry too much about it, but here we go. If there was a sa'ah of teruma tameh, of impure teruma, and it fell into less than 100, there's still only a sa'ah of teruma. There's still only this specific measurement. So let's take, for example, one apple falling into a barrel of 80 apples. There's still only one forbidden apple. So when that falls into the second mixture, according to Rabbi Eliezer, you're now dealing with one apple in a mixture of, could be 200 apples, in which case it's going to be null and void. The Chachamim say you've got to take both mixtures into account. And so when the first batch falls into the second batch, so now what you're going to have is a situation of a whole load of potential teruma falling into another load. And so you'll have to take both ratios into account in order to calculate it like that. But the point that we're trying to draw out is that Rabbi Eliezer is seeing these things as distinct items, and we're not seeing them as mixed together. So therefore, what we were saying before was, you're not fixing anything when you pick up this basket, because they have been considered as separate items. So the Gemara says, but maybe Rabbi Eliezer was expressing his opinion in order to be able to rule stringently. And over here we're saying that we can use his opinion to rule leniently. That's what Rabbi Yehuda is doing. He's holding like Rabbi Eliezer, but the outcome is a leniency, not a stringency. But whoever said that was the case? Ella Huda Amak Rabbi Shimon. Rather, he, Rabbi Yehuda, is holding like Rabbi Shimon. The Kitetznan, Se'at Suruma, Shnafla Lamea, Velo Histik Labia, Ad Shnafla Acheres, Harizu Asura. In the following scenario, if you have, let's say, one Suruma apple that fell into 100 Suruma apples, but he didn't get the chance to deal with it before another 100 apples fell in, so in such an instance, the entire mixture is going to be prohibited. And that is because you are now going to have so it would seem, I think, another another problematic apple would fall in. Sorry, let's keep it simple. One impure apple falls into a mixture of 100 good apples. That should be okay. But before you got the chance to deal with it, another apple fell in. So now you have two in a ratio of 100. So it's 2 to 100, 1 over 50. Right? So now that mixture is problematic. So because you didn't get to deal with it beforehand, then you're going to have a situation where it's asa. But Rabbi Shimon matir. But Rabbi Shimon holds that it's going to be permitted. Why is Rabbi Shimon going to permit the mixture? Because, again, it didn't get mixed in the first place. Umimai, Dilma Hasan Bahar Kumipalgi. Maybe they're arguing about the following. Tanakama Sabar, Afagav Danafli Bazeh Afazeh, Kaman Danafla Bavasa Chastani, Vahala Kamshin Nafla, Vahala Kamshin Nafla. Maybe the first opinion that Tanakama is holding, that you've got one load falling into the other load, and then you've got a second load falling in. Maybe it's like they've all fallen in at once, in which case you've only got a ratio of 1 to 50, not 1 to 100, and that is why he's going to say it's forbidden. Rabbi Shimon Sabar Kamaisa Batil B'meya, the first time that it got mixed, the mixture got nullified. V'hati Batil B'meya V'chad. And so now we're talking about a situation of 1 to 101, because the next amount that fell in was falling into produce that was completely okay. And so that's how Rabbi Shimon was simply be holding over there. And therefore we say, Ela Huda Amak Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. And so we've got a situation of Rabbi Yehuda holding like, like Rabbi Shimon, I'm sorry. So now the Gemara says, Ela Huda Amak Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. Now it's going to see if he's holding like Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. Titania, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer, no said Einaf mitzad zev, ochal mitzad acher. Maybe what we can be doing over here is we can be removing with our mind. We can be mentally separating things, even though we don't necessarily take them out. So Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar seems to be going one step further and saying that you can mentally appreciate that the ratio is big enough to be nullified, and so you are separating it out mentally, and therefore you're not going to have a problem when you are lifting this basket, when you are lifting this produce, because actually you mentally set aside these items. But then the Gemara is going to ask, as we turn the page, is this really what we're going to say? That he is holding in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. But I thought we have a source to say they disagree. Rabbi Yehuda holds that you can remove the teruma, the amount of teruma that fell in. You can remove that if the ratio is 1 to 101. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer no seneinav b'tzad zeh ve'ochal mitzad acher. And Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says you can just do this mentally. You don't need to do this physically. And so the Gemara rejects this to say to Rabbi Yehuda adifa mid Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. That fundamentally they agree, but Rabbi Yehuda's approach to this is preferred, meaning that according to Rabbi Yehuda, you would be able to use your thoughts, but Rabbi Yehuda is going even one stage further and being one stage more lenient, that even though you could have used your thoughts, you'd even be allowed to lift it out on Shabbos, which is it's always more impressive when you are able to rule more leniently, as it says in other places in the Gemara. Any haaretz can paskin a chumrah. Anybody can rule stringently. But what we're seeing over here is Rabbi Yehuda having an even more far-reaching, lenient opinion to be able to lift something up, which has been mixed together, and to be able to actually separate that. And what we've seen is that it's not going to be matakein something, it's not going to be fixing something, because they were never truly intermingled in the first place. That's the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. We move on to another Mishnah now, 5 lines down on the second side of the page. The Mishnah says as follows: Ha'even she'al pi chavis. What if you have a stone on top of a barrel or on top of a jug, whatever it might be? So if you have a stone on top of the jug, so the stone should be muksa. And yet the Mishnah says mata al tzida v'hino feles. You can tilt the barrel on its side so that the stone falls off. Says the Mishnah, Haisa ben Chavios Magbia Umata al Tzida v'hino feles. If you've got a whole bunch of barrels all placed together, and the one that you need to take out has got a stone on the opening, has got a stone on the top, the Mishnah says you can lift it up completely, move it to a place of safety, and then tip it off so that the stone doesn't fall on anything and damage anything. Continues the Mishnah, Ma'os she'alakar. If you've got money on top of a pillow, this is what we were seeing before, Menaya sakar v'hein noflas. Then you should shake the pillow and they will fall off. And you'll remember we were talking about that's when you need the actual pillow. If you need the space for the pillow, then you can remove the pillow and then use the space that it was resting on. That's what we were seeing in the last Mishnah. Haisa alav lashleshes. What if you've got a pillow which has got a stain on it? Lovely, it says bird dung over here on the screen. So we have to be careful, don't we, that we're not going to put anything on it that could start a laundry process, a washing process. That's what we're trying to avoid over here. We're not allowed to do kvisa on Shabbos. We're not allowed to wash our clothes, wash our fabrics. So if it has a dirt patch on it, the Mishnah tells us what we can do is mekan chabas marta. Our only option is to wipe it with a rag, but we won't be able to wash it with water because otherwise that's going to be a problem of kvisa. It's going to be a problem of laundering. Could end up with a problem of schita, of squeezing as well. So that's why the Mishnah is so restrictive. But haisashal or, but if it was waterproof material like leather, then the Mishnah says noslin aleha mayim ad shetichle. Then you would be allowed to put water on it until the stain is removed, because the material is not going to absorb the water. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Huna Amar Rav. Rav Huna said in the name of Rav, Lo shalu ela b'shekheach. When we were talking about removing stones, removing money, whatever it is, well, I mean, we're referring specifically to the stone, but Rav Huna Amar Rav is saying that's only when you've forgotten to remove it before Shabbos. But if you put it down on purpose before Shabbos, then you are establishing the barrel as the support, as the base, as the place in which you want the stone to reside for the whole of Shabbos, and so you won't be able to move it. If the barrel was amongst other barrels, and we said you can lift it up, move it over to the side to a safe place, and then tilt it off. Who is the authority? Why are we saying that any situation where you have a prohibited item like a stone and a permitted item like a barrel, that we are allowed to go to all this effort for the permitted item, but we're not supposed to move the prohibited item? So why does it make more sense to put more effort into lifting up this barrel, moving it over to the side, and then tilting it off? Why are we not saying perhaps that we should just push off the stone? Amar Rabba bar bar Chana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabba bar bar Chana, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, says this is the opinion of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. It is the opinion of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. It's not, because we see in a Mishnah, Habora kitnis biyontav, one who wishes to separate out kitnis, translates as legumes, on Yom Tov. How should you do it? Beis Shammai omrim bore ochel va'ochel. Beis Shammai says you can select the food you want to eat, and you can eat it. Beis Hillel omrim bore kedarko b'cheiko v'tamchui. Beis Hillel say you can select it in a normal way, and you can even get rid of the waste. And there's not going to be this issue of bore the same way that there might be on Shabbos. So you can even use your lap, you can use a large vessel, whatever it is. All of these methods are going to be okay. The Tanya, it was taught in a Baraisa. Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, Amurim. What are we talking about here? When there is more edible food than waste. But where there is more waste than edible food, then everyone would agree that you should select the food that you want to eat, rather than go through the whole tircha, the whole exertion of getting rid of the waste. So over here, we can move the barrel, which is our ochel, and not go through the tircha of removing the pasolis, which is the stone. It says the Mishnah of Hahacha, Tchi ochel murubu ala pasolis dami. But are we actually saying, are we comparing that situation to this situation where we're saying that there's more ochel than pasolis, than waste? Hachanami kevan de ibai la mishka lo mishtaka le yayin. Says the Gemara over here, if he wants to be able to take wine, he's not going to be able to take wine until he removes the stone. In which case, it is a situation of more waste than food. So it's not comparable. It's not like selecting. And that is why the Mishnah is ruling that you have to be able to move the barrel without moving the stone, and then, once it's in a safe place, then you can remove the stone. So, if you've got a situation of the barrels all together, then you're allowed to lift it up. Says the Gemara, Tanya, Brisa, Rabbi Yossi Omer, Rabbi Yossi says, if you've got the barrels which are placed in the storehouse and they're all very close together, or you've got a situation where there's glass vessels underneath it, says the Gemara, then you lift up the barrel and move it over to a side and tilt it off, and then the stone will fall off. And then you can take what is inside the barrel that you need, and then you can even put the barrel back in its place. Now we analyze the money on the pillow. Rav Chia Barashi Amarav. Rav Chia Barashi says in the name of Rav, Lo Shanu Ela B'Shokeach. Again, this is a situation where you've forgotten to move the money. But if you put it there before Shabbos, then you have made that pillow the basis, the support, the foundation, the place where you want the money to be over Shabbos, and so it's going to be forbidden to be able to move it. Amar Rabba bar bar Chana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. This is what we were seeing on the previous page. Rabba bar bar Chana said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Lo shanu ela l'tzorech gufa. That's only when you need the place. Sorry, that's only when you need the item. You need the pillow, so you can shake off the money. Assuming you've forgotten it, not put it there on purpose. But if you need the place that the pillow is occupying, then you'd be able to move the pillow with the coins still on it. Similarly, Chia Barav from Difti says, it's only when you need the item, but when you need the place, you'll be able to move it with the item still on it. Addressing again the money that's on the pillow, being able to shake it off. Let's see what it's got to say. Rabbi Yoshia says, are we in the right? No, we need to go down here. Rabbi Yoshia says, Shachach arniki b'chatzer, maniach alea kikar otinuk umetaltala. So Rabbi Yoshia says, if you forget your purse, if you forget your wallet in the courtyard, on the floor of the courtyard, then it says that you can put a loaf of bread, or you can put a child on top of it, and then move the item. Amar Rav Yitzchak says, Shachach, pardon? Okay, so yes, where were we? So if you forget your purse, so then you can almost artificially create a situation of a child holding a muktzah item, like we saw before. You can lift up a kid if it's holding a stone. So we can artificially create the ability to move a muktzah item by putting it with this child or putting it with this loaf of bread, and then you can move it. Rav Yitzchak says, Shachach leveina b'chatzer maniach alea kikar otinuk umetaltala. Similarly, if you forget a brick in the courtyard, you can put a loaf of bread on it, or you can put a child on it, and then you can move it. Amar Rabbi Yehuda bar Shila, Amar Rav Asi. Rabbi Yehuda bar Shila said in the name of Rav Asi, Pa'am achas shachachu diskia malea ma'os b'sartia. There was one time when they forgot a bag, they forgot a sack that was filled with money, and they forgot it in the sartia. They forgot it in the public domain. They forgot it in the main street. Translates it there. They came to ask the question to Rabbi Yochanan. He said, so go and put a loaf of bread or a baby on it, and then you can move it. Marzutra says, the halacha is in accordance with all of these opinions in a situation where you have forgotten. Ravashi, however, says, if one forgot, you won't be able to create this artificial solution. And the only time that we had talked about utilizing a loaf of bread or utilizing a child as a way of moving a muktzah item, that was only specifically for handling a corpse, a dead body on Shabbos, but not if you just need to move your wallet or you've left a bag of money or whatever it might be. According to Ravashi, then it's not going to be permitted to be able to do so. Abaye manach kafa akifi. Abaye would apparently put a spoon on top of bundles of produce so that he would be able to move them by on account of the spoon. Rava manach sakina abar yona amataltala. Rava would put a knife onto I've got dead chicken here, but it says a slaughtered young dove, in order that he should be able to move it. Amar Rav Yosef, Kama Charifa Shmaisasa the Dardaki Emar. Rav Yosef says, how sharp are these teachings of children, i.e., how sharp is the halacha of children? It was said in a mocking way. The Amar Rabbana b'Shekheach, because the rabbis had permitted this in a case of a situation where one forgot the item. But did they ever say that you can do this as a first resort? It's only if it's the last resort. Amar Abaye, Ilav Adam Chashav, Anakafa Akifi Lamali. Were it not for the fact that I was an important person, why would I even need to put a spoon on the bundles? Meaning that I would be allowed to move these things anyway. They're not muktzah according to them. It's only because I'm an important person, people are going to be watching what I'm doing, that I have to take care. He says they're not muksa. Why? Because I could actually use these bundles for leaning on, in which case they have a use on Shabbat. In which case I don't even need the spoon to be able to move them. And the only reason I'm doing it is in case people see me and they think, oh gosh, that important person is moving a muksa item, because they don't really understand the halacha. And so that's the only reason why I'm employing this artifice, this artificial solution. It's only because people might look at me and get the wrong idea. Amarava, ana ilad adan khashulana sakina abayona lamali. I don't even need to put a knife on top of this slaughtered bird. Hachazi le'le'umsa, because I could be eating the bird as raw meat, in which case I can move this without any problem. And it's only because I'm an important person, I'm an esteemed member of the community. I know exactly how he feels. It's only because I'm such an important person that people might look at me and get the wrong idea. That's the only reason that I'm doing it. Tama chazi le'umsa, halo chazi le'umsa lo, because so now picking up on what he just said, the reason that he's allowed to move it is because it's fitting for raw meat. But now the Gemara is saying, and inferring from this, that if it was not fitting for raw meat, then you wouldn't be allowed to use it. Wouldn't be allowed to move it. So the Gemara now asks, does this mean to say that Rava is holding like Rabbi Yehuda? Because V'ha'ama Rava l'shamei tavili bar uza v'shadi maya l'shunra. Because Rava once said to his attendant on a Yom Tov, roast a duck for me. I have it as goose, but here it has it as a duck. Roast a duck for me and throw its intestines to the cat. So he was allowed to move the intestines in order to move the cat, and then similarly, moving the dove should be allowed, even if it's not fitting as raw meat for a person, because it is fitting as raw meat for an animal. Hasam kevan de misrach date ilave me'etmol. So over there, the resolution of the Gemara is that since this food is going to go bad if it's left till after Yom Tov, so his mind was on it already from yesterday, that he needs to feed the cat, that he needs to prevent the loss of his food. So hachinami mistabra the Rabbi Karabi Yehuda Survey. So we would apply the same logic over here, being able to move the raw meat, even if it wasn't fitting for a person, it would be fitting for an animal. It would be not considered muktzah. The Darish Rava, because as Rava expounded, Isha lotikanes lebeisa etzen litul mehem ud, that a woman is not allowed to enter a storehouse of wood in order to take some wood as a stoker, as a poker. V'ud shenishba asila sika b'yontav. And if there was a broken poker, it is prohibited to light a fire with it on Yom Tov. Lefi shemasikim b'kelim ve'ein masikim b'shivrei kelim shemamina. Because one may kindle a fire with vessels that may be used, but one may not light a fire with broken vessels that broke during Yom Tov, from which we conclude that Rava was holding like the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda when it comes to items which have been set aside. Shekoyach one and all. That's all for this week. We're going to stop the recording. Feel free to join us for the after party on Zoom. I wish everybody a meaningful and wonderful day.